I'm Dan McGrath, and this is Pilot After 50. In this series, I'm going to share some of my perspectives on becoming a private pilot after the age of 50. By request, my subject for this episode is going to be talking to air traffic control and ground control. Because that's a pretty big subject, I'm only going to touch on getting initial taxi clearance and takeoff clearance. So this will be taxi and takeoff, talking to ground control and air traffic control. For a future episode, I'll probably cover talking to ATC when you're on approach for landing. It's probably not true for everyone, but for most student pilots, the radios are a major source of anxiety. They certainly were for me at first. I had a pretty debilitating fear of public speaking through my life up until I started working in politics, and I was more and more frequently forced to do it. Like anything else, with repetition, it gets easier, and as long as I'm comfortable in my knowledge of the subject that I'm speaking on, whether I'm in front of 10,000 people at a rally or in a studio with a television camera pointed at me, I feel just fine. I didn't feel fine talking on my airplane's radio, though. Somewhere along the way in my private pilot training, I heard student pilots can experience as much anxiety before pushing the talk button as when dealing with an in-flight emergency. And I believe it. My first few flights, my instructor handled the radios so I could just focus on flying. In retrospect, I'm not sure that was the best training method, but it's what I was working with. So after a few flights, she passed the radio responsibility over to me. I already always felt like I was stepping onto stage when I taxied onto a runway. I got a tinge of nerves every time before I slowly pushed the throttle all the way forward, repeating in my head, right rudder, right rudder. I was always afraid, terrified even, of making a mistake, and I was always aware that I was being watched from the black windows of the tower. Adding the comms to my routine shot my anxiety through the roof. One thing I was taught early on was push to talk, don't push to think. So I'd think about exactly how I'm supposed to phrase my communications, and I'd even practice on my flight instructor sometimes before I pushed the button. That said, there are some basic rules for radio communications. There's an order to it. When initiating radio contact, let's say with the tower, the order should go who you're calling, who you are, where you are, and then what you want or the reason for the call. So it goes who, where, and what. So if I'm asking for takeoff clearance, my call would be Anoka Tower, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa at 18, ready for takeoff. When identifying yourself, you make it easier for ATC and for traffic to know who you are by saying the type of aircraft you're in, and they can identify it by sight, followed by your tail number. I have been flying a Cessna 172S Skyhawk, but if I just say Cessna, people are generally going to know what that looks like. I could say Cessna Skyhawk or just Skyhawk, but Cessna is the default that works fine in these circumstances. When I say 18, I mean I'm holding short on the non-runway side of the hold short line for runway 18. Instead of ready for takeoff, I could say ready for departure as well, but I found most pilots say takeoff, so I just go with that. So in this case, who, it's Anoka Tower. Who am I? I'm Cessna 172 Sierra Papa. Where am I? I'm at runway 18. What do I want? To take off. So again, that call would go Anoka Tower, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa at 18, ready for takeoff. Now let's look at another common request, taxi clearance. I'll need this to get to the runway in the first place. Student pilots are usually going to be starting at their school's ramp, and at towered airports, they need permission to taxi into what's called the movement area, which is any area that's controlled by ground control or by the tower. Here's how I do that from my school. After starting the engine, I listen to the automated weather broadcast for the airport. At Anoka, that's ATIS, or Automatic Terminal Information Service. ATIS gives me the wind speed and direction and other details I might need to know, and a code letter from the phonetic alphabet. Let's say it's Bravo. The code changes every hour and is used to let air traffic control know that you actually did bother to listen to their weather broadcast. Here's an example of what the ATIS broadcast sounds like.
Anoka County, Blaine Airport. Information Bravo. Time 14:50 Zulu.
Wind 110 at 7. Visibility 6. Ceiling 4,000 broken. Temperature 5, 2.3. Altimeter 3011. Landing and departing runway 9er. Advise on initial contact. You have information. Bravo. Once I have my weather info, I can contact ground control on the ground frequency designated for my airport. So who am I calling? Anoka Ground. Who am I? Cessna 172 Sierra Papa. Where am I? At the flight school. What do I want? Request taxi for closed traffic. Closed traffic just means I'm going to stay in the traffic pattern, flying laps around the runway to practice my takeoffs and landings. So the call goes like this. Anoka Ground, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa at the school. Request taxi for closed traffic with information Bravo. When I say with information Bravo, it means Bravo is with me or in my head. You can just say with Bravo, and brevity is one of the keys for aviation comms. So I say, Anoka Ground, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa at the school. Request taxi for closed traffic with Bravo. Likely, what I will hear back is something like, Roger 2 Sierra Pop, taxi via Bravo 2 Bravo for runway 9er. Roger, this means that I've been heard. 2 Sierra Papa is the last 3 digits of my tail number. ATC often abbreviates like this. You can abbreviate to the last 3 also, but only if ATC does it first. Bravo 2 and Bravo, in this case, are the names of taxiways. Runways get numbers, taxiways get letters, and some minor taxiways have a letter followed by a number, like Bravo 2. Now, I realize this can get confusing when you're dealing with a phonetic alphabet code for the weather of Bravo, and then I'm being told to taxi on Bravo, and then Bravo 2, that's a lot of Bravos. It doesn't always go that way. So you've got to understand the context and the order of communications to follow this well enough. It helps to write down the taxi instructions to avoid confusion and forgetfulness, so I'd write B2, B to 9. Next, I need to acknowledge ground control's instructions by reading back the clearance, so I reply, Bravo 2, Bravo to 9er, 172 Sierra Papa. When responding to air traffic control or ground control instructions, you always conclude with your tail number or call sign so you don't get confused with other aircraft who may also be trying to communicate with ATC. Upon approaching the runway threshold, my airport has a convenient little parking cutout called our run-up area so pilots can run up the engine to check everything out before takeoff without blocking the runway entrance and holding up other traffic. After the run-up, I bring the plane up to the hold short line, verifying the sign next to the runway entrance reads 9er. I look down the runway, look at the sky on the approach side, and verify there's no traffic in my way, and switch my radio frequency to the tower frequency. So again, who am I calling? Who am I? Where am I? And what do I want? And no, I don't have dementia. I'm just reminding you this is the order of operations for contacting air traffic or ground control. So in this case, Anoka Tower, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa, holding short at 9er, ready for takeoff, would be my call. I could also just say at 9er instead of specifying the hold short line. ATC is going to know what I mean. Again, brevity is one of the keys to good comms. So, Anoka Tower, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa at 9er, ready for takeoff. That's the simple call to make for takeoff clearance. There are 3 likely responses to my request. Usually, I just hear back, 2 Sierra Pop, clear for takeoff, runway 9er. If I was leaving the traffic pattern, ATC would probably also give me turnout directions like, left turn to the north. Since I'm just staying in the pattern, ATC will generally tell me which way the traffic is going. Make left traffic, for example. If I'm cleared for takeoff, I acknowledge the clearance and any instructions, such as, left traffic, clear for takeoff on 9er, 172 Sierra Papa. And then I'm rolling onto the stage, or rather, the runway. If I'm not immediately cleared for takeoff, I might hear 172 Sierra Papa, hold short for landing traffic. Which means, even though I looked, I failed to see another plane on final approach. We can't both use the runway at the same time, so I'd respond, hold short at 9er, 172 Sierra Papa. Less often, air traffic control might instruct me to taxi onto the runway but wait to take off. That would go like
172 Sierra Papa, line up and wait.
My answer would be line up and wait, 172 Sierra Papa, as I taxi past the hold short line and get centered at the end of the runway. Then I just wait for ATC to call again with my final takeoff clearance. If it's busy, they might add
no delay
to takeoff clearance, which just means someone else wants to use the runway, but if you don't dally, everyone will be happy. So I'd say, no delay, clear for takeoff on Niner, 172 Sierra Papa. And I'm already rolling down the runway as I'm saying those words. Answering ATC is usually just a matter of repeating back what they said and adding your tail number. Unless, of course, they're asking you a question like, back when I requested taxi clearance for close traffic, ground control might have asked me,
full stop or touch and goes.
And if I just repeated that back, the controller might think I was mocking him and climb out of the tower to come looking for me. I'd have said, full stop and taxi back, 172 Sierra Papa. When doing laps in the traffic pattern, ATC will be watching you and will generally provide landing clearance when you're on the downwind, or sometimes even sooner than that, depending on how bored they are.
2 Sierra Pop, cleared to land, runway Niner.
Might just come across the radio unprompted. Or if the winds have shifted, the controller might let you know that as well.
2 Sierra Pop, cleared to land, runway Niner, wind 85 at 12 knots.
Either way, I just have to acknowledge the landing clearance by saying, clear to land, Niner, 172 Sierra Papa. Or I might say, Roger, clear to land, runway Niner, 172 Sierra Papa, to acknowledge the updated wind direction and speed. Does all of this sound confusing? I thought so at first, and wrote out some little scripts to follow, but the basics usually serve. Who am I calling? Who am I? Where am I? What do I want? And then repeat back whatever ATC says, adding my tail number. Now, chair flying is a method of practicing when you're not... Chair flying is a method of practicing when you aren't near an airplane. You sit in a chair and talk yourself mentally or aloud through the steps you are going to take for each phase of a typical flight. You can do this in front of a poster or computer image of your instrument panel, or even just while riding in a bus or driving your car. Practice your radio calls out loud if you can without looking like a loony, or mentally if judgmental people are around. Repetition is the key to being comfortable. Also keep in mind you don't have to be perfect. Everybody has flubbed on the radio at some point. Everyone appreciates clear, concise, professional radio communications, but if you just have to ramble in plain English to get your point across, that's okay. My taxi clearance request was Anoka Ground, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa at the flight school. Request taxi for closed traffic with Bravo. But if I had said something like, Anoka Ground Control, this is Cessna 172 SP. I'm over at the flight school on the north side of the field, and I'd like permission to taxi to the active runway to fly some laps in the pattern and practice some landings. Oh, by the way, I have information Bravo. I'd probably get the exact same answer.
2 Sierra Papa, taxi via Bravo 2 Bravo for runway Niner.
I could probably go on for an hour about radio communications, but I think I've covered the basics of what's expected, and please keep in mind that I'm not a flight instructor. Don't take this as any kind of substitute for training by a certified flight instructor. I'm still learning myself, so please consider this all just one student talking to another. To be good on the radio, learn the phonetic alphabet fluently. I used to repeat it over and over again when I was driving. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, Foxtrot, and so on. Or I'd pick out license plates and I'd read them like a pilot would. X-ray, Yankee, Alpha, 2, Niner, 7. You get the idea. And learn the common terminology. What does hold short mean? What does line up and wait mean? There's an app called Live ATC that you can get for your phone. It lets you listen to any airport's comms on your smartphone. That can be a good way to get a sense of the cadence pilots and controllers use, and to get common calls and responses locked into your mental muscle memory. Most radio communications will follow a predictable pattern, so you can memorize the scripts for requesting taxi, takeoff, and landing clearance, and you'll be 90% there. But every once in a while, you'll hear something that goes off script, maybe something you've never heard before, and it can throw you for a loop. Naturally, this will happen when you're flying solo or on a check ride. You can always ask, "Say again?" I never once did it, but you can also just fess up. "Sorry, I'm a student pilot," and ask for clarification. Controllers are generally very helpful. It's what they're there for, really, to help pilots gather information and stay safe. I once heard a controller audibly sigh before repeating himself when I asked, "Say again?" But think about that. He decides when to press the transmit button. He really wanted me to hear his exasperation before helping me by repeating his instructions. There was radio interference. I needed specificity. Seems like a personal problem to me. I just laughed at him, but I didn't press the talk button first. Thanks for checking out Pilot After 50. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you liked the video, let me know with the thumbs up. If you didn't like it, let me know how I can do better in the comments. You can see some of my other projects at danmcgrath.net, and I appreciate you stopping by. Have a great one.